And would you also, Maddie and Viraj, would you keep an eye out to see if Laura and Reyes?
Yep, just checked. Haven't seen them, but we'll keep checking.
Okay. I see you have the Q&A started also, Viraj. Or maybe that was Maddie.
And we are live on LinkedIn as well, so
Okay.
good to go.
Lindsay, I mentioned before on when we were chatting back and forth that this is the team that makes it happen. We couldn't do anything without this group. They are so good, you can't believe
You
it.
guys have a great team.
They are wonderful.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of work to run a tug for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to go live here. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our May edition of the Newbie User Group. Thank you for being here. What we usually do, and what we're going to ask you to do, is if you just go out to chat and let us know where you're from, what city you're from, what part of the world you're from, and also, did you go to TC this year? We'd like to recognize all those people that went to TC. So if you just go out to chat, enter in your name and where you're from, that'd help us out a lot. We're going to wait just a couple of minutes while people check in, and then we'll go ahead and get the meeting started. Klaus, you want to go to the next slide, because we got some bragging to do. For those of you who were at TC, you know this, but if you weren't at TC, you may not have noticed that that's you and us, you, the members, made this happen. And we, the co-leaders out here, thank you for making it happen. We're awarded this trophy. It's called a Busy, and we are the Tug of the Year, the Tableau User Group of the Year. We were thrilled to win this. Believe me, this is a big deal, and we were absolutely thrilled to win this trophy. If you were there also, we had a newbie meeting, a newbie meetup on the first day. It was Monday morning. We had breakfast. Maddie took the shot. Maddie must have come in and taken a shot the night before when people were camped out waiting to get in here. I was told that there were 600 people who tried to get into the space. And as we know who were there weren't 600 people because there was no room for 600 people. I saw the official count the other day. It was 310 people attended that meetup. And I don't know where 310 people could possibly fit in the space we were. I don't know how anybody else could have fit in that space either. But thank you for being there. Thank you for attending the newbie meetup, and thank you very much for supporting the newbie user group and all that you've done to make this group a reality. Klaus, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and start going through our slide presentation. Just a little housekeeping. There's going to be a lot of you out there today. There's already, we can see out here, there's already over 150 of you on the call already, and there's going to be a lot more. So you'll see that you're not able to turn your audio on and you're not able to turn your video on. It's just, bandwidth and mechanics of everything associated in doing that. But you can chat with one another, and we encourage you to chat with one another. If you have questions for the presenters, please don't put them in the chat. It happens too quickly that we can't keep up with what's going on in the in terms of questions and answers. But there's a Q&A, and you can go to the Q&A and put your question in there. And our team here, Maddie and Viraj, will try to stay on top of that and answer the questions for you. Or after our individual presentations, if there's a question, we'll try to answer them at that point. And before anybody asks, yes, the meeting is being recorded. And undoubtedly, the first question we're going to get in the Q&A is the meeting going to be recorded? And yes, the meeting's going to be recorded. It usually takes us a day or two to have it up on the newbie user group site. Let's go to the next one. Okay, I think I did something I shouldn't have done. I'm good. Okay, just a little bit about the group and how we came about, because I know there's some people who've never attended the newbie group before. The newbie group was started a little over 2 years ago. Klaus and I were the co-founders of the group. we became aware that not everybody felt comfortable in the newbie group or the user groups that were available at that time. They felt like the material wasn't presented at a level for them, and they really were looking for a group that they felt more comfortable in. So we founded a group for newbies. And when we say newbies, we're talking about people who maybe are a year of experience, maybe a little more than that, and or anybody else that's trying to get to the next level, that wants to learn more about how using Tableau. We meet every 6 to 8 weeks. We have 2 parts to the meeting. The first part, Klaus and I will go through a session on how does that work. We take a deep dive into something that a function that Tableau does or part of Tableau and explain how it works and what it does. And then we have a guest speaker. Today, Lindsay Betzendahl is our guest speaker. The topics for our guest speaker come from you. You guys tell us the types of things that you want to hear about. And you can put that in the chat and we monitor that so that we can start looking forward as to what we might have at a subsequent meeting. Klaus, let's go ahead. Okay, this is the team. These are the guys that make it happen. We're going to just go around the horn here and very quickly introduce ourselves. Viraj, why don't you take the lead and tell everybody who you are and where you're from?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. And hi, everyone. This is Viraj. I'm from Mumbai, India. I am a lead analyst at Merkle, and I've been part of this wonderful group for last 2 years, and it's been a great journey. And so happy to be, to be part of this team when being called the Tug of the Year. I am. I always keep saying that I'm a newbie at heart, Tableau newbie at heart, and I welcome you all for this event. Thank you.
And Viraj is also a Tableau ambassador, so we should share that. Be proud of that. Okay. I'm going to speak for Laura. Laura said she's going to be here in 10 minutes. So Laura's in Chicago, and she just showed up. She said she's going to be there in about 10 minutes, so she's going to join us at that point. Klaus?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Klaus. I'm a professor at Münster University of Applied Sciences in Germany. And I've been using Tableau since 2017. I'm also a Tableau visionary, and it was so great to meet some of you in San Diego a couple of weeks ago. I love talking to you, and I'm really grateful for all the positive feedback that you gave us. And that really made my day and my days in San Diego. So thanks for joining us today again.
Okay. Maddie?
Hi everyone, I'm Maddie Wild. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. I work at a private grant-making foundation, so I work with public data, do a lot of Tableau prep, and I will echo what everyone else has said. It was just so nice to actually meet you all in person, and having that many people there is really exciting to get to be with you guys. And we hope that you understand that this Visi is all of ours because we do this with and for you guys. So,
yeah, Maddie this was her first TC. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you plan on going back?
Yeah, I loved it. I was pleasantly surprised. I think I have low expectations for all conferences, but I learned so much, especially the hands-on sessions. I was very pleased with how in-depth those were, so that was fun.
Okay, very good. And my name's Jim Daner. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been using Tableau now for 8 years. I'm one of the Tableau visionaries, and I'm also a Tableau ambassador. We may have met out on the forum. I do a lot of work out on the forum. And we're hoping that Reyes will check in. Reyes travels around the country in a mobile home, and at some point he will probably check in and be with us. Let's go to the next slide, Klaus. Okay. Very quickly, our agenda for today, we're going to take a look in the Jim and Klaus session. We're going to take a look at the order of operations. And in my view, the order of operations is the single most important thing new users have to understand. And it's the single most important thing that new users and experienced users get confused about and make mistakes with. So it's very, very important understanding order of operation. And then Lindsay Betzendahl is going to talk to us today, and she's going to show us the title of her presentation is right there. from zero to hero in 5 simple design hacks. Lindsay is great at this. So we've had a lot of requests for how do I make my business better? How do I take it to the next level? Well, today Lindsay's going to share that with you. And then we're going to have some fun. We're going to do our typical Kahoots quiz. I'll tell you right now, no cash, no prizes, but bragging rights. And we'll go on from there. Klaus? Right now, today's the 22nd of May, and we're going to cover off the order of operations. Our next session, and you'll want to mark your calendars, and we're going to give you a chance to do that here in just a second. Our next session will be the 25th of June. And Klaus and I are going to cover calculations and table calculations as part of that meeting. But we have a guest speaker that I think you're going to enjoy. Let's go to the next slide. At our next session, a Hall of Fame visionary, and by the way, Klaus is a Hall of Fame visionary. He's not just a plain old visionary; he's a Hall of Fame visionary. Hall of Fame visionary Steve Wexler is going to join us, and he's got a presentation that he actually came up to Klaus and I at TC, and he said, "I really got a great presentation for your newbie group." So we're anxious to see it too. And it's based on the movies, charts on the screen. So plan to be there. And if you just scan that QR code, you can sign up for it now. That session is now open.
And bring some popcorn to the next session.
Good idea.
Okay, good. If you have joined us before this year, you might remember in this year we are trying to put content together to help you transitioning from Excel to Tableau. And we have already covered some of the fundamental basics that you just need to know about if you're on this journey. So we talked about data structure. I think in the first meeting in January, we talked about modifying data. Last time we had Ken and Kevin with us talking about visualizations, simple basic visualizations. And I think also today Lindsay's presentation perfectly fits into this bucket to help you bring your message to your audience with a nice and compelling design. Jim and I were going to talk today about the order of operations. Jim already said one of the most important concepts that you need to know about when you work with Tableau. For the next meetings, we will cover the remaining parts of this overview and look into the other topics. As Jim said, we're already in our 3rd year, and we have lots of meetings already online on our YouTube playlist. So grab the QR code, and if you have time, browse the content, and I'm sure there will be something for you as well. Good. Yeah, the order of operations. This is what we are going to look into today. And while Jim will do a demo of the order of operations in a minute, I have the honor to introduce the topic to you. So order of operations basically defines how things happen and how, for example, filters are applied in Tableau. And when you start at the very beginning, most likely you won't know and you won't care about the order of operations. But you will for sure get to a point where you might think, well, this is not correct, or Tableau is not doing what it should or what I thought it should. And most likely this is because of the order of operations. And I've put together a small example, and I thought let's have a look at the top 10 subcategories by state. So we are looking at the Superstore data set you might all know, and I want to learn something about the South region. And I was actually able to come up with 2 versions here. So on the left side, you see I have 10 subcategories from phones to copiers. And option 2 on the right side, I have again 10 subcategories from phones to paper in this case. You see most of my chart shows the same. So the first 8 subcategories are the same. And then in option 1, I have bookcases and copiers. And in option 2, I have furnishings and paper. And my simple, maybe too simple question is, what's going on here? What's the correct option? Shall I take option 1 or shall I take option 2? And if you were with us when Andy Cotgreave was our guest speaker here, you know the answer is always, it depends. And in this case, it depends on your analytical question, because my 2 options answer different analytical questions. The option 1 is looking at the, let's say, global or the US top 10 subcategories. So phones to copiers are the top 10 subcategories across the US. And then we are looking at the performance of these 10 subcategories in the region South. Yeah, so first the global top 10 subcategories and then the performance in South. While the right side is doing something different. And here we are looking at the top 10 subcategories by sales in the region South. So we're just looking at the South, and within the South, we are looking at the top 10 subcategories. So this is a tiny little difference in wording, but you see we get different results. And that's, of course, important, because depending on what you actually want to answer or which question you actually want to answer, you either need option 1 or option 2. And the difference when you want to create these 2 versions or these 2 options, the difference is quite simple and quite tiny, actually. And you see we have subcategory in both versions on filters. And subcategory in this case is the top 10 filter. So I've defined within subcategory only give back the top 10 subcategories by sales. And then on the left side, I'm using the region as a dimension filter. And on the right side, I'm using region as a context filter. Yeah, so this is the order of operations. On the left side, I'm first defining the top 10, and then I apply the dimension filter and filter down to South. On the right side, I first filter to region South, and then define my top 10. Yeah, so this little example already shows you what the order of operations is about. Yeah, so just being aware of that, depending on your analytical question, you have to leverage the order of operations to bring everything into the right sequence and get to the right result eventually. Jim, I think you've prepared some more details on this topic, and why don't you take it over now?
Okay, I think you have to. There we go. There we go. Thank you. Gotcha in just 1 second here. There we go. Now, as Klaus was saying, it's really important to understand what the order of operation is and how the order of operation works. Klaus, can you see my slides now?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, very good. It's very important to understand what the order of operation is and how it works. Now, you can the order of operation is simply the process that Tableau goes through every time you create a worksheet. And that sequence is the same every time. It doesn't change. You can't change it. When you enter data into Tableau, and it doesn't make any difference whether that comes from a flat file or it comes from some sort of database, you have the data that you entered in is the data set itself. Now, for each one of your worksheets, there is a separate data table. And you'll hear us talk about the data table or the underlying data. But that data table is unique to the worksheet, and it's a subset of the total data that you've entered into Tableau. Now you create the structure for that data table first by placing dimensions on the rows and the columns, and then filtering those dimensions. Now you can kind of think of that like an Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't really look that way, but you can kind of think of it that way. Once you've created the structure, you fill that structure with values, you do some math, and you decide what the business is going to look like. And in doing that, you're actually going through the order of operations. Now, I like to use this 10-step model. I know there's other models out there, but I like to use the 10-step models, and I break it down into 3 different groups, or 3 categories. The first group is the extract filters and the data source filters, and they operate on the workbook level. Okay, they limit the amount of data that you're loading into Tableau. They're filtering out data as you load it into Tableau. And if you have a smaller data file actually in Tableau, your workbook is going to be more performant than if you have a large amount of data. If you're not going to use the data, you might as well filter it out. Now, the next 8 steps are at the worksheet level. And for each one of those worksheets, in steps 3, 4, and 5, you're creating the structure for that data table. And that's what Klaus was showing you here when we talked about context filters, followed by the creation of sets, fixed LODs, and top end, and then followed by dimension filters. Once that structure is created, we just load that structure full of values, do some math, decide what our business is going to look like, and we can complete our business in the last 5 steps. Now we're going to go through these, and we're going to take a look at how these ones work. And I want to start with the first 2 steps with a very simple example here. I like to use Superstore data. It's the same data that you have when you got your copy of Tableau. In the Superstore data set, there's 800 customers and there's about 10,000 orders. Now we can go ahead and we can apply a data source filter by going over to the data source tab. And as soon as Tableau lets us, there we go. We can add a data source filter. And all we do is come up here and go add, and we're going to add a filter, and I'm going to filter out on category. And I just want to look at the furniture category. And you can see the box tells us we're going to keep the furniture category, and we're going to eliminate the rest of the data. You can see here we have 10,000 rows of data in the data set. As soon as I apply the filter, we now only have 2,200 rows in the data. And if we come back and we look at we take a look at the data, it's 2,200 rows. We had $2.3 million of sales. There's now only $754,000 worth of sales. That is the only data that's available in Tableau right now. The remaining 7,000 rows of data or 8,000 rows of data have been eliminated. So this workbook will work much more efficiently. Now I'm going to back up because I actually need those rows for the rest of this presentation. So let's go back and let's go one step further. Now, some people have asked, they said, well, that's fine, but can I make that data source filter a little more dynamic? And the answer is yes, to an extent. And I want to create a filter, and this ends up being a Boolean filter. And all I've done is created an LOD expression. It just says for each customer, total the sales, and then compare that to 10,000. So if the customer sales are 10,000 or more, it's going to return a true. If it's not, it's going to return a false. We can go back to the data source tab. I can add a filter. The filter we're going to add is that expression we just looked at, and we're going to look at the true values. Now, when we do that, we're only going to keep values that are greater than 10,000. I can see that 10,000 rows of data became 418 rows of data. And when we look at that data, we're now looking at only $275,000 worth of sales. But the key here is that expression is dynamic. And next month, when we load more data into Tableau, we might only have, instead of 21 customers who meet that criteria, we might only have 18, or we might have 22 or 24 customers that meet that criteria. So you can make that calculation dynamic, and you can use the data source and the data extract filters in a dynamic sense as well as a static sense. Now, I want to spend the rest of the time we're going to look at on the remaining steps in the order of operation, and that's the ones that work at the worksheet level. Now, we're going to look first at these three steps: steps 3, 4, and 5, the creation of context filters, the creation of sets, fixed LODs, and top end, and then the application of dimension filters. And we're going to do that because that's where most of the errors occur. And it doesn't make any difference if we're talking about new users or we're talking about experienced users. When people get confused in the order of operation, they're not getting the results they wanted out of the order of operation. Most of the time, it happens right here, where the question is, oh, do I use a context filter or do I use a dimension filter? Oh, I'm not getting the answer I wanted out of my fixed LOD expression. Well, let's see how this works. I've got in my data set here, I've got a very simple calculation for category sales. I've done fixed category sum of sales, and you can see here by category, and I'm looking at, I've got the subcategories by category. Furniture is $754,000, and my fixed LOD is just the sum of those sales. It's $754,000. And for office supplies, it's $731, and the fixed LOD is returning that. And technology is $839, and sure enough, the fixed LOD is doing what we expected it to do. What I'd like to do is I'm going to apply a filter, and I've got a filter applied on subcategory. Now, this filter is a blue filter. It's a dimension filter. Now, Tableau uses blue filters as dimension filters, and when we change that to a context filter, it's going to become a gray filter. It's just a way of being able to look at the worksheet and understand whether that's a context filter or whether it's a dimension filter. Now, the dimension filter is applied after the LOD is calculated. So when we take that filter and we're going to filter out bookcases, we can see that we filter out bookcases, and now the total of those three subcategories is $639,000, but the fixed LOD has not changed. It's still $754,000. And that's because the filter was applied here after that LOD was calculated. Okay. Very often we get a question, I want to write in, I want the formula that's going to ignore the filter. Well, it's not a formula that you're writing. You decide as the designer when you're going to apply the filter. You apply it as a dimension filter, it's applied after the LOD is calculated. And no surprise here, if we come back and we apply it as a context filter, and all we have to do is open this up, add it to context, it becomes a gray filter. We'll take out bookcases again. And now that $639,000 is the same value we get from the fixed LOD. Just another example where we've done here is I've taken a look at the creation of sets. I created a subcategory set, and this set I created using the top N calculation on the top tab of when I created the subset. So I'm creating a subset based on a parameter that we've set up here, and I've set the parameter to 5. And you can see here I've got 5 subcategories, starting with chairs and going through phones. Those are the top 5 subcategories that are in the set, if you will. Now we can filter out chairs, and we're going to filter out the subcategory again as a dimension filter. And when I take chairs out, I now only have 4 subcategories. And the reason is that we have filtered out chairs as a dimension filter after the top end were calculated. So the 5th category, chairs, has been eliminated. If we apply that as a context filter and we take chairs out, now we're going to get 5 categories. Well, we don't see chairs because chairs were filtered out before the top end were determined. So all you're doing with the context filter and the dimension filter is determining the order that the filters were applied in. It's no more difficult than that. Okay. I'd like to move on now to the last 5 steps in the order of operation. And that's where we're going to load values into that data table. And once the values are loaded into the data table, we're going to do some math and determine what the viz looks like. It's important to realize that the structure for that data table and all the context filters and all the dimension filters have already been applied. And you see, the first thing that happens is when we use blended data. And we talked a few weeks ago about using blended data and our preference for not using blended data and going to prep and actually joining the data together. But when you're using blended data doesn't come in to the viz until after the dimension filters and the context filters have been applied. And that's why you have difficulty filtering across blended data sets. And after fixed LODs have been determined, sets have been determined at top end. And that's why you can't use the fixed LODs and top end and sets with blended data. I want to go down and look here at include and exclude, sometimes referred to as the other LOD expressions. Include and exclude are LOD expressions, but they occur after all the filtering has been applied, after the context filters and dimension filters have been applied. So it doesn't make any difference in this example here. It doesn't make any difference whether the dimension is in context or it's not. I've got two expressions here. One is this include expression. We just say include category. I want to have the average sales by category, or I can exclude the category, exclude the subcategory, and determine the average sales. And we can look at our exclude statement and our include statement, and this is our average sales, and we can see that this value of 350 is the same as the average for the overall sales, and so on. And this is our include statement. I've got region filtered here. I've filtered out East, and I can apply this in context, or I can use it not in context as a dimension filter, and it doesn't change the values. That's because those filters were applied before include or exclude were applied. And that becomes very useful when I want to apply filtering differently, whether I'm using an include or an exclude statement. And one of the things I really like to do with the include and exclude statement is do a example like this, where I can look at an overall average across a category, and I can look at the individual subcategories, and we can look at this, sometimes referred to as a bullet chart. And once again, these values are not going to change whether the filter is applied in context or not in context, unlike what happens with the fixed LOD expression. Now, I want to move down to take a look at the application of measure filters. Measure filters are applied to the values that are in the data table. Context filters and dimension filters are applied, and they change the structure of the data. Measure filters are applied to the value, and they only pertain to the value. And measure filters can be applied to something like this. I've just got a simple, we've just taken a look at each one of those subcategories, and I want to take a look at the sales by subcategory. And I want to look at I want to apply a measure filter on sales. And when I apply that, you can see this window opens up, and I've got an option on how I want to apply it. The first option is all values. And if you've heard me speak about this before, I think that's a misnomer. That really should say is all the values in the detailed data set, the data table that you have underlying this viz. But that's a little long, so they just selected all values. Or we could do it on an aggregation. So let's look at an aggregation here. We're going to take a look at the sum of sales, and that's what we've got here, the sum of sales. And we can see that we've got values here that range from $8,500 to $330,000. I just want to look at values that are greater than 10,000. And we can see that now all of the values in this table are $10,000 or greater. If I came up to the Analysis tab and opened up View Data, and I don't know how many of you have used this tab, this tab allows us to see, in summary, the table that we're looking at. You can see that table is 16 rows of data, and there's 2 fields, subcategory and sales. We can also look at the underlying data. The underlying data for this tab is 9,965 rows. That's slightly less than the 10,000 rows in the full data set. Okay. And we've eliminated one category or two categories by applying this filter. I could have come in and I could have applied this to all values. And I want to just look again at 10,000 as my lower limit. And now there's only two subcategories that have any records greater than 10,000. And what we're doing here, when we look at all values, this again is the summary that we're looking at. We've got 2 rows of data. If I take a look at the full data set, what we filtered out of the underlying table, the data table itself, is everything except these 5 rows of data. There's only 5 rows of data left that are $10,000 in sales or more. 4 of them are for copiers and 1 is for machines. And if we were to put in order ID here, for example, we'd see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 different orders for copiers that are totaling 10,000 units. So when you're applying measure filters, you're applying the filter to the values that are in the table, but you have your choice on how to apply that. You can apply it at the level that you see in the biz, that you see in the chart itself, or you can apply it at the underlying level. We use some. You could use average, standard deviation. You could use any of a variety of aggregations here. The one final topic I want to talk about is table calculations. Table calculations occur last in the order of operations. They're step 10 of the order of operation. And the thing you have to remember about table calculations is that every other type of filter has already been applied, and all the calculations that you've got in your data, be they fixed calculations or the determinations of sets or include or exclude expressions, all of those calculations have already been done before you get to table calculations. I can take the results of any of these calculations, like a fixed LOD, and use it in a table calculation, but I can't take the results of a table calculation and use it in a fixed LOD. And very simply, it's because the order of operation starts at the top and goes to the bottom, and fixed LODs are calculated way up here in step 4, and table calculations are in step 10. If we were to take a quick look here, we get very often get a question on a running calculation. User will come in and say, well, I've got this calculation, I've got the sum of sales, and I've just I'm using this running total, and what I'd really like to see, I've got the running sum of sales here, and it's increasing here from the 1st of March up through the end of November. And what I'd really like to do is I'd like to just look at the last year's worth of sales, and they'll apply a filter, and they'll say, I just want to look at 2023 sales, the last sales I've got in the data set, the last 12 months, and I get the answer, but it starts here at 0. And now you understand that this is a dimension filter, and the dimension filter is applied here in step 5 of the order of operation, but the table calculation doesn't happen until we get down here to step 10. Okay. Well, there is a way of applying a filter, so all we look at is the last 12 values here, but we have to use a calculation that happens at the same time or after the table calculation is actually performed. And we can do that with another table calculation. The calculation I chose here is last. Last just counts the number of columns, and this happens to be 0 here, and then it counts positively going to the left. So if last less than 11 will produce the last 12 values. And if we looked at the last filter and apply it as true, we will see the last 12 values in the filter. Okay, this is the total data. Now we're just looking at the last 12 values. But we did that by applying a filter that's a table calculation applied to the running calculation, which is also a table calculation. We've had questions, and I see questions quite often. coming up on the forum and elsewhere, where people want to do something like they want to find the rank or the rank of, let's say, like the subcategory by segment by year, and they want to see how that varies over time. Well, we can do that, but we need to start with finding what those values are. And this is just an LOD expression that says, I want to take a look here at by the year of the order date, the segment, and the subcategory. I want to sum the sales, and those are the values that we see there. And then I'm going to rank those. And I can rank those values because this LOD is calculated in step 4 of the order of operation. This rank is a table calculation that's calculated in step 10, and we're going to calculate that in a descending value. And when we do that, we can find the rank of each subcategory by segment by year, and we can see how that varies over time. We could take the result of the LOD expression and use it in a table calculation, but not the other way around. Very important when you're thinking of the order of operation that it doesn't change. It's always the same. It always goes from step 1 through step 10. Most of the time when we see errors and we see problems happen, it's because we're trying to do something out of the order of operation. I'm going to stop sharing now, Klaus, and back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Great presentation. I think I could take away some new things. Perfect, good. Yeah, I think, Jim, you already wrapped it up perfectly. So whenever you have the feeling that there is something going wrong, most likely it has to do with the order of operation. So come back to this presentation. There are lots of resources out there on the order of operations, and I'm sure you will find out, you will figure out the problem with your vis, and most likely it's in the order of operations. Okay, let's move on to the next topic and meet our guest speaker, Lindsay Betzendahl. She's a superstar in the Tableau community. Lindsay is a 5-time Tableau visionary, a 5-time Tableau public ambassador. And like us, she's also co-leading a user group, the Virtual Healthcare User Group. And I really cannot believe this. I do believe it, of course. She has unbelievable 14 visits of the days. So around half of the visits of the days you find on Tableau Public are coming from Lindsay. She works as a partner and senior consultant at Health Data Viz and is also the co-author of the book Visualizing Health and Healthcare Data. Lindsay, it's our pleasure to have you with us today and to hear about your design hacks to make good visits even better.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Klaus, for the introduction. All right, so you want me to, let's see, get this going. All right. We good here? Yes?
We can.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. All right. Awesome. So, yeah, I'm going to be presenting a couple design hacks that I really hope both meet the need of kind of understanding little tiny tips and tricks to improve dashboard design, but also keeping them simple enough and interesting enough that you're going to learn hopefully a new, Tableau skill, something kind of under the hood as well. So I don't need to say all this, as Klaus did a great introduction already. I've been using Tableau for 10 years, next month actually, which is crazy. I had to look back to what the first version was that I was using, and I think it was 8 something. So it's a long time, but it's been a fantastic journey. And figured, sometimes we all share all the things that we've done over time, but I wanted to just say, hey, look, here I am, real person. And these are, some photos. There's my sons and my husband in the top right, and some fun times at the Tableau conference, which was the 9th one I had attended as well recently. So hopefully whoever went enjoyed your time there. It's always a great time. But let's get to it. So I'm going to start my presentation with really a brief introduction to the stages of competence and the journey of creating or learning, which might be a visual you've seen before. Because when Jim asked me to present, I initially really struggled to identify like what would be the good techniques to share with this group. And as I was kind of saying a minute ago, I wanted to find things that were both practical, meaning like you can use them in a day-to-day. I didn't want something that was going to be interesting, but maybe not something you're going to use all the time, but also relatively simple to implement or that utilize some kind of an underutilized concept. Interestingly enough, I will use a calc that uses the last function, and Jim just teed that up. So how fantastic is that? And then I'll get into the good stuff, which the 5 things I'm going to show are a technique about how to use less color in a chart, custom legends, a trick about using white space that is going to be something you might have seen before, but I'll be debuting something slightly new, I think. How to do some multi-labeling lines and using totals and bar charts creatively. So hopefully you find something, at least one of those tips that's useful. Okay, so why do I even bother like starting with this 4 stages of competence? Because I know you want to get to the Tableau stuff. But I do think that as a new Tableau developer, it's really important to understand how both your skill level, but also your awareness of your skill level will change over time. And that a lot of this is the progression of you learning and growing. And I'm going to share some actual personal examples so you can kind of see visually how this could play out. Okay, so what am I talking about? The 4 stages of competence. The first is stage 1 is unconscious incompetence. So this is when like you may be getting really early on in your career and you think, making visualizations must be super easy. How can it be? Like, I see these things all the time, right? Sometimes it's like the stakeholder who's like, can you make this? It's got to be easy, right? You're just making something pretty. And you're like, okay, it's not, right? So this is where you're unaware of really what you don't know. You have no idea how big the breadbasket is. You might not even know what skills you need or what skills are even available to learn for that matter, right? You simply just don't have that knowledge quite yet. An example of this is, these are some very old vizzes, not that I did, but of an organization that I worked with at the time. And I don't think folks knew, that things could be better, right? It's just like, this is maybe as good as it gets. Like you have no idea what skills you don't have and what skills might help improve upon your work. The second stage is conscious incompetence. Try saying these 10 times fast. So here's where you start to think, all right, yeah, I can visualize data and I understand it's way more than just putting some charts on a page. You understand that there's some skill and you know the skills to learn, but you realize you haven't quite mastered them all yet. Right? So you're aware of what you don't know. And this is a good place where, some of you might be in the stage now, is where you don't know everything. So you start seeking it out, right? You're attending this tug. You're going out and learning. So, early on for me, it's like, I made some mistakes. Like, I don't know what I don't know, or I know that I don't know everything. I'm just going to try to learn and keep doing and, making mistakes because then you learn from them, right? It's just like that whole seeking out all the knowledge, essentially. Stage 3 is when you have the tools. So this is conscious competence. You have the tools, but it still takes a lot of effort. And this, I think, is a period of time that a lot of people, once they get here, stay in this for a while, right? You know how to reference resources, to remember how to do something. You'll maybe later bookmark this video because you're like, I remember Lindsay said, and I know where to find it. Doesn't mean you always remember how to do something, but you know where to find it. You know how to do these things. You don't quite run on autopilot just yet. So this is where you produce good work. Perhaps with some more advanced, the skills and techniques to use and you know where to find them, but you don't always remember all the nuances perhaps, right? So you utilize the entire Tableau community, maybe internal resources and other learning to keep up with those skills. And the last stage is unconscious competence. So this is where you can create visualizations naturally and almost without much conscious thought. So it's similar to like driving, where you're just kind of on autopilot. You don't know, when or why you did all the things you did, but you get from point A to B and all's good, right? And so some of the reason for saying this too is that I think as people get further along in their Tableau skills, it actually makes it sometimes harder to communicate the what, the why, and the how of what they did. Because you're just like, I don't know, I didn't think about all the steps, I just did, right? And so part of that is a little bit of a disclaimer for me, because I always encourage people to ask me, how do you do this? How do you think about your design? And the reality is sometimes there is an autopilot, and some of the skills that I know I just do. But, I think there's also a lot of people who are very good at getting what's in their brain out onto the page and having great blogs and sharing their knowledge. So please always ask questions, and hopefully I can answer the why, what, and the how, which is what I'm going to do some today. And the last thing before we get to the good stuff is just to always remember that we're all on this journey, and people are at different places along that path. So don't ever get discouraged when you're comparing yourself to somebody else. We all started at the beginning, right? You've all seen this, and so I'll just mention it again, is that there's always a lot to learn about Tableau. And I think initially you're always thirsty for knowledge, and it can be like drinking from a fire hose, frankly. But even if you get exhausted and frustrated, obviously this is part of the whole process. And as time goes on and with continued persistence and effort, you'll kind of reach a stage where you look back with fresh eyes and see how much you've accomplished and how much the journey from learning something has changed your whole perspective, perhaps on, data visualization than from when you started out. All right. So with all that, now we're going to go into the actual Tableau side of things. So again, if you take nothing away from this talk, just take away that things that look advanced and give you that kind of wow factor don't have to be super complicated. I think we often see a lot of things on Tableau Public or even on like Information is Beautiful that probably are really advanced, but underlying all of that are some, there's some simple things that I think you can add to your tool belt and use in your visualizations, like starting right away. So with that, I am going to switch over to Tableau. All right, let me end this so I can see. Cool. All right. Now I'm going to look at my other screen, so I apologize if you're looking at me and you don't see what's going on. Okay, so the first one is how to color only the end of the bar. And when I originally was thinking of this, had this titled, something about resisting the urge to use color on like everything. And I was like, all right, I don't want to like tell you can't use color, because I like color a ton. Okay, so here's an example of, okay, I'm going to just color the bars that actually have a negative profit. We're looking at sales, but I just want to point out, hey, by the way, they had sales, but just keep in mind these ones had a negative profit. Now you may be saying, Lindsay, this looks fine. It's only 3 bars that are colored. Like, why should I do anything different? And totally right. Like, this is absolutely actually fine. But for the purposes of illustration, I'll challenge you with this. Let's say a stakeholder says, I have to look at all these subcategories, but I do want to know which category they belong to, and I need them colored. You're like, all right, this is a lot, right? Like, it works, but why do we need all this color? Because imagine if there's more than one chart on the page, there could be a lot of things going on that can be distracting and perhaps not entirely needed. So one solution I like to use a lot is this technique where you're kind of only coloring the end of the bar. This adds a little bit of the visual indication without overwhelming and saturating the page, because bars naturally take up a lot of space and therefore a lot of color. So I will show you how this works. So this is a pretty simple trick. It does require a dual axes. So if you can't do that because there's something else you need to have on a dual axis, this wouldn't work. But what ultimately you do is, if I let's see here. So our first pill is our sales. That is our bar, which you'll see over here. And that is just colored gray. And I do like to use gray on a lot of things when I can and just use color to highlight an accent. The second mark, and I'll show you how you just take your pill again, or you can also like Command Shift kind of thing. And then you make it a dual axis. And then you change this mark to a Gantt. Now, as long as both marks are the same size, so you just click, make sure they move together. So you can always change it together versus independently. The Gantt will just be this little bar at the end. And then you can put your category or whatever your dimension is on color. And so this allows us to have a little bit of pop of color. And I'll show you how this is even more impactful when you have more than one chart on the page. All right, so that is labeling kind of the end of the lines. All right, so as we add to this, next is using custom legends. Again, you may say, Lindsay, what's wrong with the ones that Tableau provides, right? Like they're dynamic, they look pretty, decent, okay, they're not the worst, I guess. Everything could be worse, right? But I hate them. So sorry, Tableau, I do not like their legends. I don't know what it is, just they drive me nuts. Okay, so here you have a line chart and our newly designed bar chart. One way you can do this is simply putting in some Unicode characters, which I use all the time, and manually typing this in statically. This is a very simple way to add in a custom legend directly below the title so that you don't have to mess with wherever you're going to have Tableau's legend. But the downside is it is static. So if you have something that is going to change, you're going to have multiple values that change based on selections, or it could update. This wouldn't be a good way to have a custom legend. Again, it works some of the time for some use cases. The other downside is you can't select this legend because it's just text in the title. I can't interact with the legend. Again, I use this quite frequently when there are circumstances there are just two different things, male, female, let's say, or I have true, false, and this is going to make sense for my data, and I don't need people to select it. However, if you do, the alternative is creating this custom legend that is actually dynamic. And you'll see how I can highlight on furniture and notice how it highlights the line chart, as well as those bars that you can see now are purple. And it kind of like helps it all pop. I can see all the different parts. And I will show you how to do this. So the custom legend is created. Let me show my header here. So what you do is you drag out whatever the dimension is, and this allows it to be dynamic because now I put out this category and you'll see it in headers right here. So if this were to change, if we got more categories, the field would obviously populate a new column. Then we have these placeholders. This is just an average one. And if you don't know this, you can just double click in the row or the column and type in average one, press enter, and it makes an axis. I'll bring up my axes for a second. Now, you may ask, well, why are you putting these, creating these axes? The long and short of it is because if I don't, Tableau doesn't do a very good job of managing marks and then text if there's nothing on rows or columns to kind of constrain it and allow it to be flexible. And I want my legend to be flexible, and I'll show you too in a minute. So all you do is you create this. This just makes it, into essentially a box and you edit these axes so they're equidistant. So I have from 0.5 to 1.5, so that my value of 1, this is where it's plotting each of these. I can make them mark a circle, and I can color it. So I can use Tableau's other default things. I don't have to bring anything external in. And I hide my headers. And now I have this here. And what you'll see is, I'll show you, if I pull off these, now there's less ability to kind of have these marks change and it be dynamic and really like work well in the space. You see how it kind of got all squished up. So this forces Tableau to actually spread these things, these marks, consistently across the rows along axes, which are dynamic. So that is my dynamic custom legends. Okay. All right. So the next one is header spacing. So I can imagine, or a lot of people have created visualizations where you put a discrete value. So in this case, I'm putting quantity as a discrete value, which means it's a header, discrete header value, in front of my bars, right? You should always line up numbers, particularly numbers and percents, to right align them, so that I can see that this value is certainly bigger than this value just by looking down the page. This is a really just good design recommendation. But when you do that in Tableau, the number gets very close to the bar. And I think sometimes is confusing as if it is the value of the bar, but it is not. All right, so how do we get around this? Well, we can actually add essentially a fake calculation that has nothing in it as a string, which creates a column that we now can dynamically change. So you'll see this is a column here, there's nothing in it, and I can change its size. So I can see it right here and decide how far apart do I want these numbers to make sure it's enough white space and that people can conceptually know and see that this is quantity and these are sales, right? The trick here that I don't think has ever been shared before, so this is the world debut, is not that what I'm saying is new or interesting. I mean, it is interesting, otherwise I wouldn't be sharing it. Because let me show, we've always been able to double click here and just type in 2 open parentheses, right? That creates nothing. So that gets us this blank column. The difference is I have this label at the top. I don't want that because I want to be able to show my subcategory and quantity row field labels. And so it will show this one. Instead, what I've done, here's the cool thing. Pay attention. I've put that same value in here into my calculation, those open quotations. But you'll see there's what appears to be no title. Now, Tableau actually doesn't allow you to have no title. But what I've done instead is grabbed a blank character. So you can actually go to blankcharacter.com and grab a blank. I don't know if I can even copy it from here because I don't know where it is, right? Let's see. No, I can't even find it. But there's a blank character in here. I'm not sure which direction it is. So when I have it now, you'll see it doesn't have a title at all. But now I can put it up here and still maintain having my field label in the view. So I know, Dennis, what? Like, seriously. Who knew? The other great thing about then putting in or using this technique is the other thing you can do is I still want to now label this part. And Tableau, when you do sales here, we all know that our axis is at the bottom. And there's some other tricks you can do to like kind of hide. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to share that trick because I don't like it. Instead, you can do the same thing. You double click, type whatever your header is for that measure. And now you have both your sales for your main measure, your bars, and we've got our subcategory and quantity with that lovely space. And now we have a very nicely designed bar chart. All right, I got 2 more. All right, so I recently needed to do this with a client, and again, this kind of maybe goes back to my dislike for legends in general, and how can I avoid having so many things on the page? So this is how do you label lines differently, like the ends of lines rather, because what I want to do is not this. I want to be able to have one end of the line tell me what the line represents, the color, right? Furniture, technology, office. And I want the other end of the line to give me the value, right? I don't want both. I don't need technology on both things. And once I've seen it once, I get it. And if I were to do this successfully, I could actually remove my legend entirely, perhaps. So I want this, right? So in this case, I've labeled my beginning of my line with the category and noted the color. So now I'm well aware office supplies is teal, and then I can see the most recent value. And I think this is great sometimes, again, always with the it depends. If you have a lot of lines, you might not want to be doing all this, but this works really good for, 2, 3, 4 lines, because this really helps somebody with the concept of connecting the color and the legend directly on the line versus looking up here and down and up here and down and back and forth, right? This keeps the legend right in the view, which I find more ideal. And so how do we do this? And hopefully I'm still okay on time. All right, so this is, I said earlier, I think Jim alluded to this a little bit with using the first and the last function, which is a table calculation. I think they're underutilized. Like, I feel like you don't need them until you're like, I need them, right? Like, they're not a go-to all the time, but here's how this is done. So I have a calculation called label start, and it's gonna be my category. So if the first value is 0, so that is the way the table calcs work, is that the first value in the table for each of these is going to be 0. So this is literally the first dot in this whole along the green office supply. So if it's the first one in the whole table, then I want to show the category. Now, because the table calculations end up being at the aggregate level, you do have to wrap your dimension in kind of a min-max concept. Either technically would work. And then otherwise, I don't want anything to show. So this is an IIF, which is basically if this is true, then do this. If it's not true, then do this. Okay? Then same thing, you'll probably guess how this works. When you're labeling the end, we say if the last is 0, which again would be your last point in the underlying table. If that is true, if the last is 0, then we're going to say sum of sales, otherwise nada. So we bring both of these calculations onto our labels. And so you'll see them both here. Doesn't really matter if they're like next to each other or what. One's only one's going to be true on either end of that. And then the compute using is just in this case along the table across. Now, depending on your view, you might have to fiddle with this, but this works with the lines. And so now I have a very nice line chart where I'm able to label these, the beginning and end, in a different way. All right. And my last one is about bar charts and how to accommodate showing the totals of bar charts, but without having them screw up your axes. In this sense, you'll see the first column I have here is sales. So as soon as I introduce the grand total in here, which is just from analysis, totals, I show my column grand totals. you'll see that now sales for the total obviously is the sum of all these. Well, that makes my axes now too big that I can't really see the other values very well. Same with profit. Well, I don't really want to add us all up. Like, that doesn't help me. But let's say for profit ratio, which does make sense at an aggregate, I do want this to still be a bar. Like, I want this axis to be dynamic, that as things change, my total is a part of the bar. But I don't want these ones to screw up my axes. Right? So what if we could do this instead? And I think plenty of stakeholders probably ask for this. I want to see the total, but then you're like, it's going to ruin my chart. So I'll show you the final thing, a way to maintain the bars that show, in this case, sales, with just the text as the total, but have it as a bar for one of them. Oh, did my other one disappear? I know it's still there. Okay. All right. So lastly, so this does require a couple extra calculations to do it, but you know, when you really want something to work, sometimes you take the extra effort for that design if it's going to solve the problem. So let's see, sales for total. Here we go. So in this case, I use another underutilized function, which is the size function. Let's just see, what does Tableau say that is? There we go. Returns the number of rows in the partition. So when you're totaling something, right, it is actually taking all the other rows within it. And so it is, sorry, so when the total is, sorry, this is the total. Hold on, I'm getting all tongue-tied here. The size of this partition is going to be 1. And so when it is 1, we're going to say 0, otherwise the sum of sales. So what ends up happening, if I show this header here, and you probably can't see it here, but if I view this data under my total, it's not going to show my, that's not going to show it. It is forcing this value, the sales for total, to be 0. So it's showing just at the 0 mark, and everything else is showing the actual sum of sales. And this is just computing using table down. This is also a table calculation. So it just forces a 0 for the total. And I did the same for profit. So I just force a 0 instead, and then I get my sum of profit. These are the two calculations that I've put up here on my columns, but I've labeled it with the actual measure I want, which is just sum of sales. So when I have label on sum of sales, now I'm getting the actual total value as the label, but the mark is actually represented at the value of 0. And so now I can customize this one to not show a bar, and this one not to show a bar, but this one is just our regular profit ratio. So it is showing the bar along the axes just as we would like. And finally, if we put all of this together, what we'll see here now is I can both show you my custom legend that actually is now filtering and highlighting. I can see my label lens. I have my Gantt with my colored and bars that translates to this. I've used the same technique to show how I can actually call out color, but again, very minimally without the whole bar, because otherwise there'd be a lot of different colors here. I'm trying to avoid too much, but enough that you see it, right? Like you see this. And here I just have something where I'm highlighting like the ranked, top 5 profit ratio to show how, if you do want color in there, the most important thing, and in my pretend situation, I'm saying the most important thing is, hey, stakeholder, I want you to see the top 5 products or subcategories by the profit ratio, but I need you to know all this other contextual information too, to help you really understand it, right? So this is why I would minimize color in other places. This is why I would add this space so that I can maintain all this really important information. This is why I would label the end, so it's not totally cluttered, but it gives you the information that you really need when you need it. While I'm not going to go into it, I do have in the back end some other ways of actually labeling this header with sales and profit ratio. It's a similar technique, just with a text, so that I can have these sort of headers, particularly if I remove the axes at the bottom, which I did, because you don't really need the axes if you're already labeling everything. I can already kind of tell what the axes range is. So, but that is another thing that is in the back end there. I will post this whole dashboard to Tableau Public by the end of the day. So you can find that there. This is my Tableau Public link if you want to be able to grab that and download it later. So that's all I got.
Lindsay, absolute superstar. I told you you'd be great. This was wonderful. I first saw Lindsay do something like this, I don't know, a couple of years ago when Siga was still doing because I forgot the name of it, but in India, and you had 10 tips.
Yes, yeah.
And I told her I've only seen it twice, so I now know 2, and I have to go back and find the other 8 because it goes so fast. It just goes right through my head. Wonderful. This was really great. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, if anyone has questions or they want to reach out, feel free. I'm at Betzendahl Data on X. I still want to say Twitter though, because but thanks so much.
I think there are no particular questions open. Maybe one was about resources. So what are your favorite resources where you get inspired or where you get your tips from?
Yeah, I mean, most of the things I end up either sharing, well, I'm not the only one that ever does them or finds them, are usually because of just trial and error and trying to solve an actual stakeholder problem or problem that I have, and really thinking through how Tableau works and what can I do. In terms of other things I look at or design ideas or where do I find inspiration, obviously I look on Tableau Public a lot. To anybody, I kind of browse, I search for things, and I look on Dribble a lot for ideas outside of Tableau, because sometimes you see something in another platform and you're like, that's actually really effective. Can I make it happen in Tableau? And the whole can I make it happen is just what gets my gears turning and thinking about solutions. Just trying until I solve it, failing until I don't fail anymore, I guess. But
that's how it works, right?
Yeah.
Laura, are you and Maddie ready with the quiz for us?
Yes. So since I was late, Maddie's the one who did all the questions. So once again, thank you, Maddie. I got caught up in some work. I was back from vacation, so that's basically what happened.
Well, if you're going to be a dedicated employee, we'll have to talk.
I know, right? I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Maddie?
Laura has the Kahoot, so we're all ready. I think Laura's going to share her screen. Yep.
Okay, very good.
Let me see. I'm just going to start it, and then I'll share my screen really quick. I want to make sure that my audio is not too high, because that's happened quite a few times in the past. Okay. Let me see.
Lindsay, if you have seen the chat, it has gone crazy, with your tips.
Yeah, Lindsay, you were getting amazing
crazy.
comments. People were getting their minds blown.
Great.
Yeah, I'll stop the audio. It's a bit, have a very low volume. If you're interested in joining, please do feel to join. I know that this little icon is new. I don't think they had it before. I noticed it last time when we were playing. Once again, I want to say thank you to Maddie because she had some amazing questions. I joined late, so I'll wait for a bit for people to join and then I'll start.
So while we wait for people to join in, there was just one question, and probably I answered it, but then I would want to know your answer to Lindsay that what are some good resources for the Unicode characters? Where can we get some Unicode characters?
Yeah, I had just seen that. So I actually use I have a Mac, so I just use the native like keyboard that I can select my Mac by clicking the my computer button, because that gets me most of them. So I actually don't use necessarily website, but the empty character one is one that I do just get grabbed from emptycharacter.com. I'm pretty sure that is literally the website. And then other ones, sometimes I'll just Google it if it's not one that I can find in my own, emoji library that is on my computer. And Windows might have the same kind of function where you can pull up.
Yeah, I guess there's some key combination, Alt key plus some numbers that can help, but then
Yep. Because for the most part, you're going to get a lot of them with like the circle, the up, down arrows.
Right.
So probably accommodate 80% of what you need. So.
Right, and I think one of the sessions by Flourish Twins also they just do Google and just pick it up from there. So
yeah, you just kind of copy paste it from anywhere. Yeah.
So thank you. No, thank you for that. I did see that question. So thanks for asking that, Viraj. We have 70 people. I was waiting for that. I will get started. So I lost somebody, but that's okay. Okay.
We'll get them back. Don't worry.
I got them back. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Maddie. So Maddie put together all the questions. I was too busy looking at the chat and everything. So what can happen if you have an issue with your order of operations in your dashboard? If you paid attention to what Jim said, they should be but obvious. Let's see. Yeah, so basically all of this can happen. If your order of operations are incorrect, you have all of these different things going wrong, which is why that is really important. Let's see.
Oh, we had a fifth option today in the chat, like ask AI.
I did see a lot of that. Let's see. Sorry if you were not able to join the Kahoot, guys, but which of these filters come first in the order of operations? That's a very good question. I forget that all the time, so I am out there Googling.
Also, Viraj, I'm sorry you didn't get to launch your Mnemonic device today. You'll have to tell us which one you did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so data source filters. Let's see. I do know some of the people from previous sessions. Some of their names are familiar. So Gigi, you're doing good. Wonderful. It's true and false. Measure filters change the structure of the data. The volume is a bit high. Oh. False. It doesn't change the structure of the data. It does. You just have to adjust it properly when you're filtering it, like when Jim showed it. Let me go to the next question.
Toby is on the top. Nice.
Yeah. I see some people. Leah has been staying there since the beginning, and Alex, I believe, too. Let's go to the next one. How do you do that? How do you make a dynamic data source filter? I don't know how to do that, so I'm looking forward to your answers. Ooh, I did get a few answers. Ooh, 1 second. Ooh. Yeah, so you can use the LOD calc on the data source level in order to get a dynamic data source filter. There's the other one that was the second one. Most of them were LOD questions that were popular. So yes, I would also Google it, but it did a really good breakdown of order of operations. So I always look up to him for that. His presentations have been fantastic. Toby, you're up there. Awesome. You see some new people on the board. Another true or false. You can add a dimension filter to the context to make it apply before other dimension filters. Big wordy, but. So basically, can you apply dimension filter on top of each other? I believe. Is the music not going on? I don't want it to be awkward silence. Yes, you can basically layer dimension filters on top of each other, I believe.
Yes. Oh.
Okay, Toby, you're doing good. Sometimes people's name are up on the scoreboard, and at the end, somebody else shows up, and I'm like, where did you come from? So, hoping that's not the case here, because you've been doing really well. You have to pick 2 for this. So, see which ones you're going to pick. This is great. I did not know how to do this. My questions are not this fancy. So.
What if we select all 4?
Yeah, no, it has 2 answers. So
Only 2. Okay.
Yeah, you have to choose 2 of them. So the data source filter and the extract filter. Those are the ones that you can apply to the workbook level, not the worksheet level. And let's go to let's see who. Okay, Toby, you're doing really good. I will be mad if you're not on the final podium. All LODs happen at the same table in the order of operations. I'm not sure. I think I missed this session, but Maddie has the question, so please don't be mad at me if I don't say it right.
I guess this session, the recording for this should be bookmarked forever. It's a perfect thing to learn about.
Yeah. This, I have another one marked from Jim as well. Jim's Tableau public contains. Yes.
Laura, one thing I did when I first started learning is I printed out the order of operation. Yes, real live paper.
Yes.
Set it on my desk so I could just look over at it and see what I was doing wrong.
I did that for Tableau boot camp. I had it printed out like old school. I took notes in a notebook. I'm not embarrassed, guys. I'm not embarrassed.
I still have it.
Like that.
Yeah, even I have it on my desk always. So.
Yeah, I still have my notes. Keep your notes, guys.
OneNote can only go so far most of the time for me. I'm not pulling up OneNote or any of my note taking if I'm just. So yeah, this is from Lindsay's presentation. I love this presentation. Not that I did not love Jim's, but.
Laura's on fire.
Yes, unconscious incompetence. That's where we saw all the beautiful pivot table Excel charts. That's what I deal with at work sometimes. So I have been trying to convert them into Tableau. So that's the fun part of when you have a lot of data on legacy systems. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it.
Yeah, and I hope you mean the same fun as you say it's fun. So
yes,
converting data from Excel to
Tableau. It's a lot of work, but I'm having fun with it. So what is the magic behind coloring the end of a bar chart? I had not thought about this before, so this is basically blowing my mind. I've looked through Tableau Public so many times, but I never really paid attention. So this was me actually paying attention. So thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that tip actually had most reactions. People were crazy.
Yeah, people were really excited about that one. I think this was the last question, and the next one is just going to be, please join us for June 25, 2024. Next month, we have Steve Wexler, legendary Steve Wexler. He was one of our first speakers when we started this user group. He's coming back on again, and he's going to be talking to us about charts, which is basically his bread and butter.
You might know Steve from Chart Chats because that's a podcast that he puts on regularly.
Awesome. So we're gonna E plus. Alex. Yeah, I really hope it's Toby because sometimes it does weird things. Yes.
Yeah. Hey,
Awesome.
nice.
And
Congratulations.
we had a question. Yes, there is absolutely no cash or prize involved. But
Yeah.
Toby, you get bragging rights until next month.
Yes. You can share it. You can take a screenshot of it and share it that you won the May 2024 Newbies Tech Quiz. I'm sure they shared it previously, but we did win Wizzy's, one of the best tugs in the Wizzies. So bragging rights. Let me stop sharing. Awesome.
Maddie, you are awesome. So wonderful questions.
Excellent, Maddie.
Yep.
Thank you.
Superstar.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Oh,
everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
If the panel would like to stay for a second, got a couple of things
Sure.
to wrap up. But thank you, everybody. We hope to see you next month when Steve Wexler will speak.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Okay.
I'll stop the recording now.
Yes.
Awesome.